I've been excited to try this cocktail of the week because it is lemon Moscato. You know Moscato is my favorite, and I didn't know there was such a thing as lemon Moscato. It is made by Oliver Winery, and it was sent to me by one of you guys, Bernadine, one of my followers and friends. She sent me a whole box of wine, all Moscato. It's amazing, and I've been saving this one. There we go. ASMR. Let's give it a try. Smells good. That's good, and you can taste the lemon. I wasn't sure if you'd be able to. That's really unique. I like this a lot. This will not last long. Welcome to Nurses Uncorked, where I pour out the unfiltered truth about healthcare life. I'm your host, Nurse Erica, serving up real talk straight from the front lines to your ears. Each episode, I'm uncorking conversations that matter to nurses everywhere, from the hilarious to the heartbreaking, the inspiring to the infuriating. No filters, just authentic nursing experience shared with a splash of humor and a dose of honesty. So grab your favorite beverage, put your feet up, I know they're tired, and join me as we uncork another episode of Healthcare Reality. Now let's get this shift started. We have a fascinating guest today, Amy Loughren. You might not initially recognize that name, but you will immediately know who she is when I say Amy, the good nurse. Welcome, Amy. I'm so glad you're here today. Thank you so much
for having me.
This is going to be a great episode. I just know it. For those that may not know, I'm going to give you a little background. Amy gained infamy for being the nurse who worked with Charles Cullen. Her undercover work, including secret recordings and forensic analysis of Pyxis records, was crucial in exposing him. Dubbed the Angel of Death by the media, Charles Cullen is one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. He worked as a registered nurse in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Over the course of his 16-year career, he murdered an estimated 40 patients, though experts believe that the true number may be well over 400, by administering lethal doses of meds such as insulin and digoxin. Cullen eventually pleaded guilty to killing 29 patients and was sentenced to 18 consecutive life sentences in 2006. Now, prior to about 2003, Amy was a trauma, an ICU, and ER nurse, and a self-proclaimed lazy Buddhist. I love that. She was an overworked single mom who kind of inconsistently meditated and read the occasional self-help book. But that all abruptly changed when she was whisked into a real-life true crime drama, which catapulted her on a spiritual quest to try and answer why she was blind to a murderer standing right in front of her. Amy has appeared on 60 Minutes, CBS This Morning, The Katie Couric Show, Inside Edition, and many more. She has been featured in People Magazine, BBC, Harper's Bazaar, Women's Health, Elle Magazine, and countless others. She hosted a radio show about holistic and metaphysical healing called Bringing Home the Beacon. I love that. And Amy's part in the investigation is chronicled in the 2013 book titled The Good Nurse, A True Story of Medicine, Madness, and Murder by Charles Graeber. Amy was portrayed by Jessica Chastain in the 2022 Netflix feature The Good Nurse, and is also featured in the Netflix documentary Capturing the Killer Nurse. That was a mouthful.
That was
Hi,
a lot.
Amy.
What an intro.
Oh, it's a lot. It's a lot. And
It is a lot. It's a lot, even, just thinking about, like, even listening to this, like, to think that was this much of my life, and it sounds so big. It just sounds
big,
so big.
though. It is.
Yeah.
And you should be so proud of yourself for what you've gone through and overcome and what you continue to accomplish now in the wake of that. So let's get into some questions, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay. When did you first begin to suspect something was wrong with Charles Cullen's behavior, or when you realized you had to get involved?
So, embarrassingly enough, working side by side with him, and truly, like, we were always a team together. And you know that coworker that you bond with, that, you know, you change your schedules so that you can work together. He was my work husband. And when we had downtime, we were always talking. Um, but I did not notice anything. I think I noticed that he was depressed. I definitely noticed that there were probably some mental health issues there, but
Okay.
there was nothing glaring to me. He was a good nurse. Like, everybody went to him. Back then we didn't look anything up on our phones or even on the computer. We were using our little PDR
Yeah.
and looking up our medications, and he just always knew. If we had a question, he was our go-to guy. So unfortunately, I did not, embarrassingly, did not notice anything.
I don't be embarrassed. You have nothing to be embarrassed about, because I want to be clear on one thing. If you hadn't risked your career and your life to put him away, he may very well still be out there harming patients. So you have nothing to be embarrassed about. You eventually went undercover to help detectives. You wore a wire to record a meeting with Charlie, and you printed med records from Cerner on the down low when no one was looking. How did you balance your fear and sense of duty while helping with the investigation?
You know, it was that guilt of knowing that I saw the evidence. I saw he had been murdering people, and knowing that I hadn't stopped him, and the fact that I didn't see it, it was like I was on a mission to make sure that he never harmed anyone again. And when the hospital started shredding evidence, and when the hospital was deciding that they were not going to cooperate with the investigation, I took it upon myself to say, this, I would rather lose my career. I would much rather lose my job than to be on the wrong side of history. And so, yeah, I think it was just my sense of there were victims, and I felt responsible for those families, that I needed to get this right. I needed to put it right.
Yeah. And we're going to get into the hospital's culpability and all of this in a little bit. But during that time, you were dealing with being diagnosed with cardiomyopathy and not having health insurance yet. At one point, Charlie even pulled cardism from the Pyxis to give you during an acute episode. Do you think your health condition at that time affected your decision making process or opinion of him?
So in the movie The Good Nurse, it said that I did not have the movie depicted that I didn't have insurance. I actually did have insurance,
Oh,
but
really?
I
Okay.
was but I was a travel nurse.
Yeah,
So that meant that if I was out for a certain period of time, I needed to have a procedure done. And so if I missed more than 6 shifts, my contract was gone, my insurance was gone, I
got
wouldn't
it.
be able to afford the Cobra. Um, and so I was working so that I was going to finish the next 13 weeks so that I could have the procedure that I needed, it was a type of maze procedure. I don't know if you know
Okay.
what a maze procedure is, but
A
it
little bit.
is an old time procedure that they used for atrial fib, where it was an open heart procedure where they would go into the right atrium and make all of these cross section scarring to stop atrial fib. So they were going to use that on me to stop the dysrhythmias, but they had perfected a new procedure at the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland where I didn't have to have open heart surgery. So I was waiting to be able to get that procedure. And yes, I was exhausted. My ejection fraction at that time was only in the 40s. I was, being a single mom, I was working 12 and 16-hour shifts. And because Charlie was the person that was always helping me, I I absolutely think that clouded my judgment. Absolutely.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that your story really speaks to me is the whole single mom aspect, because I was a single mom for most of my kids' lives growing up.
Oh,
And people know it's hard, but they don't know how hard it is.
yeah.
Only other single moms
Yep.
really get that. And so
Yep.
I can't imagine facing that diagnosis as a single mom. That's a
Oh,
whole
yeah.
other layer.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you and Charlie were very close friends, and you
Mhm.
mentioned you thought he was an amazing nurse.
I
But
did.
eventually, your moral compass kind of took over, guiding you through the investigation. Did you ever struggle with guilt for not seeing the signs earlier?
I struggled with guilt all the time. It was and it it wasn't just the guilt of not seeing it sooner. I also felt guilt about betraying my friend
Yeah.
because, the fact was I really cared deeply for him. I
Yeah.
cared deeply for him. And I didn't know the murderer. I never understood the
Right.
murderer. I knew my friend Charlie, who was kind and sweet and soft spoken and an underdog and someone that I wanted to protect. And here I was, um, going to the police station, or actually, it was the New Jersey prosecution offices, and we were recording conversations over the phone. And here I am sitting there with the phone up to my ear, and I have, maybe 4 detectives sitting around me, plus a tech guy that is listening to me. And I have to just like get into a space of still being his friend,
Yeah.
and knowing that I was lying to him, knowing that all of this was happening behind the scenes. And I I just I was just riddled with guilt on every side.
Do you have a theory on why he did it? What do you think his
Yeah.
motive was? Can you share that?
So, um, Charlie was a very, very um, disturbed child. He um, he was the youngest of 8, I believe, and he lost his father. I think he was still a baby when he lost his father, and they like lived in Section 8 housing. He was in this house filled with older kids who were bringing in boyfriends, who were, and there were there's definitely theories that he was abused by one of the boyfriends. But he tried to commit suicide when he was 9 years old. That was
Oh
his
my
first
gosh.
Yeah, that was his first attempt at
Wow,
yeah,
that's
he
so
tried to
young.
commit suicide. And then when he was 13, um, he tried to murder his his sister's boyfriend.
How did I
So,
not know that? I've heard
yeah,
all about the animals. He was
yeah,
suspected of harming
yeah,
some pets. I
yes.
did not hear that.
Yeah. So he already had this murderous tendency, and it was
Okay.
poisoning. he put eye drops in a drink. So he knew even at that age what chemicals to use to kill his sister's boyfriend. Yeah. And then his mother, when he was 17, his mother was in a car accident. Actually, his sister was driving, had a seizure, and his mother was killed in the accident.
Oh,
And
God.
his mother was like his mainstay. Like that was
Yeah.
the only thing really holding him together. And when he went to the hospital, they had already taken her body away and he wasn't allowed to see her. And I think that there was this switch in him then, this anger and this
Yeah.
murderous tendency. And I think when he became a nurse, he decided that he was going to act that out. He had all of the tools that he could
Yeah.
to feed into this murderous tendency. And I think that it was just an obsession, an obsessive compulsive disorder that just kind of went wrong. And I also think he had some type of dissociative disorder because
That makes
he was
sense.
two people. He was
Yeah.
two people.
Wow. I know you went to visit him in prison a
I
few
did.
times eventually. What was that experience like? And when was the last time you had contact with him? If there's one thing nurses are, it's natural born innovators. We see a gap and a need, and we immediately go about fixing it. And a great example of that is Stink Bomb Odor Blocker. Because did you know it was created by an ER nurse? A nurse who was sick of all the products that didn't work to cover up all of the nasty smells that we deal with as healthcare workers. She had tried all the sprays and masks that didn't work, even the nebulizing coffee, because, yeah, that's actually a thing, the menthol salve that was a sticky, goopy mess. None of that worked. So she actually developed Stink Bomb Odor Blocker. Looks just like a little tiny chapstick, fits in your pocket, and you dab it under your nose. Comes in a million different scents. It is the best thing for healthcare workers. You should go to stinkbombodorblocker.com and use code uncorked15 for 15% off your order. Wow. I know you went to visit him in prison a
I
few
did.
times eventually. What was that experience like? And when was the last time you had contact with him?
So after the book came out, and he really found out that I had worked behind the scenes with the New Jersey prosecution, that kind of ended everything. Um, but when I when I first went to see him, the very first time that I went to see him, it was just like I was just doing the ugly Oprah cry. Like
Yeah.
I walked up to the glass and put my hand up to the glass, and he put his hand up to the glass. And I just, the first thing I asked him was, did I hurt anyone? Did I kill anyone? And, you know,
And how would you have done that with the IV bags that he had spiked?
Yeah, which I know I did. But I wanted him. I just wanted someone to make it okay, and I
Yeah.
wanted it. I wasn't going to get the right answer. Of course, he was
Right.
going to say to me that I didn't hurt anyone, but I was with him. I know that I was hanging those bags, and of course, all of us became accomplices to his murders.
Unwitting
Yeah.
accomplices. Yeah.
Mhm.
You had a whole celebrity press tour, red carpet experience for quite a while when the movie came out. How
Yeah.
did you feel watching The Good Nurse for the first time? What was your reaction?
I had held on to so much guilt for so long. And of course, I didn't talk to anyone about the the whole experience with working undercover, um, and I just really held that in, and watching Jessica Chastain up on the screen as I was watching her and seeing how vulnerable she was and seeing how much she cared, and I'm watching the character of Amy, I was finally able to heal that part of myself that I released all of that guilt. I could finally see that I I know I did the right thing, and it was okay that I did not see it soon enough.
So it was healing for you in a
It
sense.
was very, very healing. Although it was a Hollywood story, and
Well, yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. Was there anything left out of the movie that you wish had been included or aspects of your personality that you felt maybe were misunderstood in the film?
um, when I watched it, I saw um, how gentle, Jessica was. That that part of me, that Amy part of me that was gentle. I was actually kind of a badass. I was really like I was I was quite confrontational. Back then, I had quite a chip on my shoulder, and I was, I was definitely a lot harder than than they portrayed. Uh, the one thing I really wanted them to change was the fact that Charlie never met my children.
Yeah.
In the movie, I understand why they left it in because it's very hard for people that are not in the medical profession. I it's very hard to understand how close we get to our coworkers.
That's true. We're
Like,
trauma bonded.
yes, we are very much trauma bonded, and that bond is sometimes no, it oftentimes, most of the time, that type of bond is stronger than our other relationships.
Absolutely.
And they needed to portray this um, this relationship that I had with him as being extremely close. So, how was the audience going to understand how much I trusted
Right.
him? So, all in all, it was a really good thing that they left that in there. Um, but I have over and over again said that if we did live closer to each other, I was driving to New Jersey. I lived in upstate New York. I was a travel nurse.
Mhm.
So if we did live closer, he would have met my children.
Mm. Okay. That makes sense. You're right. Because if you're not in nursing or healthcare, you do not get the bond
No.
that we have. We spend more time with our coworkers than we
Yes.
do with our family and friends.
Yes.
That's absolutely
Exactly.
true. So I can kind of understand why they would do that. And I have to say, Jessica Chastain, superb in that role.
I know.
So
I
good.
know. And she's such a doll. Like she is like a little fairy. She's really tiny.
Is she?
Yeah, she's really tiny. And uh just like working with her and doing press with her, and afterwards we kind of kept in touch a little bit, and I went to see her on Broadway, and
In what?
we
What was she in? I'm a huge Broadway nerd.
she was in Doll's House.
Okay.
She was nominated for a Tony for that role.
Amazing.
And there was this really, really cool part where she's on stage by herself, just in this chair going around, and she's not making eye contact with anyone in the audience. And she looked up and she saw me in the mezzanine, and she nodded to me. So it was
Oh,
just,
I
yeah,
love that.
she is just such a doll. I just love her.
That's good to hear because you
Yeah,
never know with celebrities.
yeah,
That's good to hear.
yeah.
There was also the documentary capturing the killer nurse that was released in 2022 that features a lot of interviews with you. I'm just curious, did you prefer one over the other, the movie adaptation or the documentary?
The documentary was stunning. It was just
Yeah.
stunning.
Yeah.
It got it right. And it also showed that there were other nurses who tried to stop him. There were other nurses who recognized that something was wrong.
Yeah, there was like
And
3 of you, right, that were
yeah,
really close. You and
yeah,
another nurse and
yeah,
Charlie.
yeah.
Yeah.
But there was a nurse at another hospital because there were, and we haven't gotten into this yet, but there were 5 hospitals that knew that he was murdering.
Okay, I thought it was 9. I was
So
gonna get to
he
that.
worked, yeah, he worked at 9 hospitals.
Okay.
All 9 of them suspected something. 5
Yes.
of them knew
Gotcha.
knew he
Okay.
was actually murdering people.
Yeah. So let's talk about that because I'll just read my question here. Charlie worked at least 9 different hospitals and a nursing home, and he moved around a lot because he was frequently fired or forced to resign. But hospitals failed to report their suspicions to the authorities, allowing him to continue harming patients time and time again. Hospitals either knew or had suspicions, like you said, but did not report it or try to stop it. And I want to repeat that because people need to hear this. Hospitals knew and allowed him to continue working, knowing that he was
Mhm,
murdering patients.
mhm.
That to me is the biggest takeaway
Yes.
because while I don't
Yeah,
want to minimize anything that he did, the
absolutely.
fact is we know that there's going to occasionally, it's very rare, but occasionally there's going to be these crazy, serial killer, angel of death type situations. But I really feel like the hospital is almost more culpable. And to me, in
Yes.
my opinion, and I'm curious if you're going to agree, one of the worst, in my opinion, the worst offenders was Mary Lund, the risk manager at your hospital, who
Mary Lund.
appears, yeah, to have blatantly withheld evidence and tried to prevent employees from speaking to authorities until they finally threatened to confiscate the Pyxis machines. I want to get Mary on this podcast. I cannot tell you. I want to know all your thoughts about Mary Lund and your thoughts of the hospitals withholding this and allowing patients to be heard.
So Mary Lund, the risk manager, after Charlie went to prison, she was promoted.
Oh, I didn't
She
know that.
she was promoted.
Shut up.
She's
I mean, I'm
still
not surprised, but are you
yes,
serious?
she was promoted. She was promoted. Uh-huh. And
Oh, that's vile.
it is. And Mary Lund um, was uh, Mary Lund was aware of the fact that Charlie was truly murdering people. She knew that he had been using medications. They saw the Pyxis printouts.
Uh-huh.
She's a nurse.
Yeah.
So she saw the same Pyxis printouts that I did. She knew that he was murdering people. The hospital knew, the medical director knew, and they waited. So I believe they found out in July that they had a murderer on their hands. They knew it was him by August, knew it
Okay.
was him.
Yeah.
They fired him in October. So
Oh,
he
2
murdered
months later.
So he murdered at least 8 more people after they knew that he was murdering people. They knew it, and
Didn't
they left him on the floor. They left him with us,
Yeah.
and then when the detectives came in and were trying to get a name, they gave they gave the detectives a name of a phlebotomist.
What?
They
I'm learning
knew.
so much. I
Yep.
thought I already knew so much about this
No,
case.
they knew it was Charlie. They already knew
Of
it was
course.
Charlie.
Yeah.
And they had already done their investigation, but they gave them a name of this poor guy, this poor Filipino phlebotomist.
How is a phlebotomist getting their hands on Dig and insulin? And I just learned in researching this vecuronium at some point.
Oh yeah.
How's a phlebotomist supposed to get their hands on a
Yeah.
paralytic and all that? Come on.
Yeah. But what they were hoping for is that these detectives would just be kind of thrown off the case, really trying to bring a case of medical homicide to court is next to impossible because you don't get a smoking gun. You
Yeah.
you cannot unless you can place them with a witness that
Mhm.
actually saw them truly murdering, but the way that Charlie was doing it, no one would have no one could go to court and say I saw him murder this person. So it's next to impossible to try. And so they were hoping that they could move him on to someone else. It's not
Yeah.
their problem. They're not going to have to pay out the lawsuits.
Yeah, and
And
that, of course, was their only concern, was
yes,
protecting the
yes.
hospital from any potential liability. But of course, the more they went along with it, the less they did, the more liable they became.
But Erica, what I think about is what mental illness
Yes.
did
Yes.
Mary Lund have?
Exactly. Exactly.
What
How
mental
much do you
illness?
have to be removed from reality
Yes,
and narcissistic and only concerned about
yes,
yourself
yes.
to just sit back and go, I mean, he's
But
probably going to
it's like,
kill some more
it's
people.
not,
It's
yeah,
fine.
but it wasn't even like her. Like she, the idea that she was covering for the hospital, like there's some serious issues, like this weird capitalistic, um i i i I think it's like some type of neuroses that
Mhm.
these bureaucrats have, that they're so far removed. They only see the dollar. They don't have any care in the world for any patient at all. At all. They could give a
It's true.
flying shit.
That's
They
absolutely
do not
100%
care.
true. And I say it all the time, but I don't think the public really grasps it. And this is a perfect
Yes.
example of
Yes.
how evil they are. Like, I think people hear
Yeah.
that and they're like, oh my gosh, like you're dramatic, you're exaggerating.
No.
No, they are
No.
truly
No.
evil. They
Yes,
they
they
sit
are.
back and knowingly,
Yes.
willingly, gleefully
Yes.
allow for
Yes.
people to suffer and worse for
Yes.
their own personal gain.
Yes.
These are evil, evil people.
Yes. They had a serial killer on their floor. They knew it. They had already done their investigation, and they did nothing. They did nothing.
What happened to
Luckily, the detectives were not idiots.
Okay, good.
And luckily, like they um they also had Charles Cullen's name.
Mhm.
Um and they the lead detective, which is interesting, the lead detective Danny Baldwin, who we're still like excellent friends, like
Oh,
we're
I
we're
love
still in,
that.
yeah, we're still in contact. I just talked to
I
him
love it.
last week. But his wife is an OBGYN.
Okay.
And so he was kind of like running things through her. And she even said, she's like, there's no freaking way a
Yeah.
phlebotomist is
Yeah, there's
like,
no way.
there's no way. There's no way. So yeah, he had someone medical in his ear as
That was
well.
probably very helpful. And I know you were super helpful because you basically did a forensic analysis of all the Pyxis printouts and the EHR, because I mean, it's a foreign language if you're not in healthcare. And the Pyxis printouts alone, if you're not a nurse that actively uses those automatic medication dispensing machines, that's a foreign language, right?
And also the Pyxis back then. So the changes to the Pyxis that took place after the investigation were because I was able to just give the Pyxis company my knowledge.
That's amazing. Tell us about that.
So back then, the Pyxis, when the drawer came open, the cassettes themselves did not have anything over them. Like the cassettes, it was like open like a cash register.
I remember that. The entire drawer would be open instead of individual meds separated and covered and locked. Yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah.
I'm that old.
I know, 35 years a nurse. 37
You've got maybe
years. So the Pyxis, when that drawer came open, the other thing that was interesting is unless you worked on that particular unit, you didn't know what was in those drawers. So when the drawer popped open, I knew that digoxin was right next to, I believe that it was peroxide.
Okay.
So he was taking out peroxide on 5 patients a night. Who uses peroxide?
Yeah.
So like it was like simple things like that no one would know. Like he was going in and getting A&D ointment, and potassium was right next to the A&D ointment. He was going in and getting Tylenol, and right next to the Tylenol was, norepinephrine.
Jesus.
So it was, it was just like this
perfect storm.
Yeah, exactly. And, you didn't have to count anything. There were no counts. And he also did this very interesting thing where he would deplete a certain medication, and he would call the pharmacy and say, this medication is depleted. Will you please come and restock it? And he would sit at the end of the hallway and wait for the tech to come up.
And then take it from them?
And then he would say, let me just go and do this. I'll do this. I'm going back to the Pyxis right now. So he would take these bags of meds and go back to the Pyxis and maybe put 2 of them in and then put the rest in a stockpile.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
We're getting a bad thunderstorm now.
Are you? I can't hear it. I love a good thunderstorm.
Yeah.
What's Mary Lund doing now? Do you know? Is she still working?
I don't believe she's still working. I know it wasn't that long ago that I had looked her up on LinkedIn, but she was still working as, like a VP. And
at the same hospital at Somerset?
So Somerset is no longer. It was taken over by like St. Barnabas or Robert Wood Johnson. They've changed hands so many times. But she did stay within the St. Barnabas
organization.
Yeah, org. And she just kept getting. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Evil. That woman has blood on her hands, even if it's indirectly. She absolutely is responsible for countless patient deaths, almost as much as he is.
Yes, I agree. And every single hospital where he was murdering people and someone knew, that's why I am thinking there is some type of like cognitive dissonance or
it has to be. Yeah.
It's delusional. like it's something really, like, it's got to
Well, it's
be.
self-preservation. I mean, and narcissism, in my opinion. I mean,
Yeah,
they are going to be rewarded monetarily. They're financially incentivized
yeah,
to protect their role and protect the hospital, the
yeah,
organization, right? So
yeah,
it's like a self-preservation.
yeah,
I'm gonna do me. I'm just gonna
yeah,
do me.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, there's been a few other similar cases. It's very, very rare, but Lucy Letby is the one that comes to
Mhm.
mind
Yes.
immediately. She was I'm sure you know, the NICU nurse in England
Yeah,
that went on trial for they say killing numerous
yeah,
infants. I
yeah.
forget the exact number. What would you say to other nurses or healthcare workers who think they might possibly be in one of those really rare situations working alongside a nurse who could potentially be harming patients? What would
You
you say
know,
to them?
it's so difficult because we are not, our our thought process does not leap to a nurse is murdering people.
Right. It's true.
That's a huge leap.
It is.
Usually it's, okay, this nurse seems a little strange, or,
Yeah.
kind of, maybe antisocial, or there may be something about them, but making that leap is so hard. So the
Yeah.
only the only advice is to keep your own mental health in order,
Yes. So
because
important.
one of the things that was very, very obvious at the time is that my mental health was very
Yeah.
poor.
Yeah.
So I could not see the signs. So if you if you are focused on making certain that you are taking care of your own mental health, then you have a clear grasp on, when you see something, you're not going to push it aside.
Yeah. Well, this experience and this trial really changed your life. And it's safe to say that it led to kind of a spiritual awakening for you. So tell us about that and the many titles that you now hold. Here's just a few: Reiki master, hypnotherapist, meditation instructor, integrative energy healer, crystal language reader. I don't even know what that is, medical intuitive, and so much more. Tell us about that and your journey.
So I really had a pretty challenging meltdown. I I think
Sure.
it was it was almost 3 years after the Charles Cullen episode, um, the investigation, and I felt like I wanted to do something to give myself a way out of nursing. I didn't know anything but nursing. And
Yeah.
nursing is such a trap for us,
It
because
is. That's so true.
we know how to make money, and we
Yes.
know, okay, I can just work 6 shifts
Mhm.
and pay for whatever I need to pay for,
Well, and it's our identity. I mean, tell me another
absolutely.
profession other than maybe a physician where
Absolutely.
someone says, "Tell me about yourself." And the very first thing out of every
Yes.
single nurse's mouth is, "I'm a nurse." Not
Yes.
any of the other things that make us who we are. It
Yes.
always is, "I'm a nurse."
Yes.
And so it's very hard for us to separate that and go be something other than a nurse.
Yes. So I took a summer off after having a complete meltdown, and I had to leave the contract that I was in at this hospital. And I had this wonderful friend who said, "Go and stay at my cabin for the summer with your girls." And so we were in the Adirondacks at a beautiful cabin on the lake, and I just decided, okay, what else can I do? And I started reading about hypnotherapy, and I had met someone who had done hypnotherapy, and I said, this could be an option because hypnosis, they used to use hypnosis for anesthesia.
Mhm.
And there are very, very talented hypnotists out there that will go to hospitals to be with patients and use hypnotherapy for them for different procedures. So I read about that and I'm like, I'm going to go to this hypnotherapy course. And while I was there, I had this, I I don't have another word for it, but it was like a spiritual awakening. Like it
Yeah.
was like everything changed. I um I woke up. A part of me woke up. And then I just sort of became obsessed with this spiritual path. And I had been a Buddhist since I was 18. I did meditate, but not, I wasn't consistent. And all of a sudden, I am waking up to all of these other modalities. And I went on this quest to heal myself and to find ways to feel better, without medication, without therapy, which I actually do those things now. And I actually am
Good.
on medication now. But
I think
I
most nurses
just
are.
kept taking, yeah, but I just kept taking, course after course after course, waking up. And I had a very lucrative practice, hypnotherapy practice, when I had my radio show. And I loved every minute of it, but I knew how to make money. And
Mhm.
doing
Yeah.
that, I
Was
had
an
to,
unknown.
well, I had to self promote all the time. I had to
That's hard.
be like, there was just this sense of, I always had to be like, you know, going to social functions and putting
Mhm.
myself out there. And it just wasn't comfortable for me. So I went back to nursing. Um,
Okay. I didn't
so
realize that.
I was able to take all of this and bring it with me. And I was a completely different nurse. I nursed completely different. And I wasn't afraid to talk about all of these things that may have seemed woo woo in the past. I
I love
was
woo-woo.
helping other nurses talk about those things, use Reiki, take Reiki courses, do spiritual quests, and give them a, a look into a possible path that they could have for themselves for their own mental health. And I didn't realize that it really was for me going back into medicine, bringing all of that with me, and then putting it out there in the world. And I became a nurse that I truly respected. There was no longer that chip on my shoulder. I was
Yeah.
no longer confrontational. I was just very different. I had changed so much. And then started running a trauma unit and I was just very happy doing that because I did it in a way that I would have loved to have had me, that type of leader. I
Yeah.
became that leader. I became that type of leader who did care and who did give a shit and could actually go to bat for the nurses. And I never left the floor. I never made myself stay in my office. I was still on the floor with my nurses every day, every single day.
I totally get that because I am a completely different nurse now than I was years ago. And very much like I had a huge chip on my shoulder for years, for years. Um, Youth is wasted on the young, right? If only
Yes.
like I always say, I would be a totally different parent now if I had my same kids in the same situation now. I would be a
Yes.
completely different parent than I was back then, and I would be a
Yes.
completely different nurse than I
Yes.
was back
Yes.
then. So
Yes.
I really get that. Yeah, but
Yes.
I mean, we learn going through all
Yes.
these things.
Yeah, we do.
What would you tell yourself if you could go back in time and talk to yourself at that time going through those harrowing days? What advice would you give yourself?
Hmm. I would have said continue to trust. Um, there were times where I was so fearful that perhaps the detectives were playing me. And I had
Yeah,
this
you didn't
little
know who to
voice
trust.
in the back of my mind, like maybe they're setting me up. And I just like I was so fearful at every turn. And I think what I would have said was trust your intuition. They they genuinely want to protect you, and they did. And they continue to protect me to this day.
Oh,
So, yeah, I would have just said trust your intuition.
are you working now in nursing? What are you doing now
I
these
am
days?
not working in nursing, and as we're
Okay.
talking about this, when you said it's like our, it's our identity, I
It
stopped
is.
working yeah, I stopped working in nursing a couple of years ago, and I really went into a depression. Like,
Really?
I could not I didn't know who I was. Like I was
I get
just
that.
like sitting and not doing anything. I was just watching Netflix. I was becoming agoraphobic. I didn't want to go out.
Yeah.
I really lost my or felt like I had lost my identity, and found a good therapist, started on some great medication. I am doing fantastic now, really, really good now. But when I was, really seeing my own clients and, I still do one on one. I am still teaching meditation. I am still a spiritual mentor for people. And I was feeling like such a fraud because I
Yeah.
was struggling so much. And then I realized that that is the whole point. I'm supposed to struggle and move
Mm.
forward because that's what we do. We expand, we grow, and then we are able to move into the next level of wherever we are. And yeah, but I have a great therapist, and I also have a spiritual mentor that I see. So
That's amazing. And I think one of the reasons it's so hard for nurses to work in something other than nursing is, you know, this is no shock, but sometimes we can be a little critical as a group. Sometimes we can be hard on others, right? And one of the go-to things that nurses tend to do is, when was the last time you were bedside?
I
When was the last
know,
time you? And I mean, I'm guilty of it too.
I
I do
know
that too. But that's hard to overcome if you
it
are
is.
transitioning away from that
Oh
because
yeah,
you're going to get that criticism
I
and that
know.
hate.
I
It's
know. I
hard.
know. I know. And the idea also, like, saying, oh, well, I'm a trauma nurse, I'm an open heart nurse, I'm an ICU
Yeah.
nurse. Like, there's that, feeling of being like so
A
skilled
superhero.
and yeah.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I am, babysitting my grandchildren.
Well,
Like, I love all of that. I love everything, but I still have dreams about even the other night I had a dream that I was back in the ER and in a trauma and
yeah.
having all of that adrenaline, and it just feels good. It just felt good.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I have no interest. Really.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
really have no interest to have all of that cortisol in my system again. I have no interest
Yeah.
in
Being
having
in
a
constant fight or
yeah,
flight. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Speaking of nurses being difficult, is it true that early on you were kind of trying to take Charlie under your wing and protect him from some of the other nurses on the unit?
Now for your enema of the week.
I received a package this week from Happy Bum Co. with some of their new products. And I'm so excited because, in addition to all of their amazing at home enema products, they have Happy Gal Balance and Uplift Tea. It's an organic herbal tea. I have not tried this one yet, but it smells amazing. And they sent me Happy Bum Constaclear. It's magnesium oxide, which, if you know, can help treat constipation, right? Magnesium's kind of complicated. There's lots of different types, but it's the mag oxide and the citrate that actually can help with constipation. I've already tried that one. You can see my notes on top, like a real nurse. I said 1 TID. I'm already using that. I love it. And of course, they have all of their regular enema products. You should go to happybumco.com and use code UNCORKED for 15% off your first bundle. This week's Enema Award is brought to you, as always, by Happy Bum Co., a leader in at-home enema solutions. And no one will be surprised to learn that the Enema of the Week award goes to Nevada Governor Joe Lombardo, who at the last minute swooped in and vetoed SB 182, which would have given nurses safe nurse-to-patient ratios here in Nevada. It would have been great for patients and nurses. It had miraculously passed both the House and the Senate here in Nevada, and he came in and killed it. So this week's Enema of the Week award goes to you, Governor Lombardo. You suck. Speaking of nurses being difficult, is it true that early on you were kind of trying to take Charlie under your wing and protect him from some of the other nurses on the unit?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. And not just that, but I ugh, so that the the most challenging incident that happened for me was a patient who had gone into VTAC. And I was the code leader that night. I saw the patient go into VTAC. I knew that patient also was, had earlier gone into VTAC, but came out of it pretty quickly. And I saw she stayed in it, and I yelled a code. Someone was getting the crash cart. I got into the room, and Charlie was pushing lidocaine, which it's not a bad medication. It
Yeah.
was just that at that time, that was when we made the transition over into amiodarone. We use lidocaine again in ACLS, and
Yeah.
it's a perfectly good medication. But at the time, we weren't using lidocaine for VTAC, and we were, at that time we were using amiodarone, and Charlie was such a proponent for using amiodarone, loved it, talked about it all the time. So here he is pushing lidocaine, and I'm
Yeah.
like, well, he's brilliant, he's got to have a good reason for pushing lidocaine. I remember kind of doing a little bit of a head tilt and like, that's odd, but okay, all right, we're
In the
on the
moment. Yeah.
lidocaine train. And then the resident shows up, and I'm giving him the debriefing so that he can catch up. And he said, who the F gave that lidocaine? And I said, because it was Charlie and I wanted to protect him, I said, I gave lidocaine. I said that I did it.
Yeah.
And he said, this patient is allergic to lidocaine.
Which is why he was giving it,
So
right?
I literally walked in on him murdering this patient. And after that happened, we did lose her. She died. And he came to me after that and he said, don't ever, ever take responsibility for me. Do not ever do that.
Really? Wow.
Don't do that. He said, I can speak up for myself. And so he was trying to protect me. But it was in that moment I could have stopped him. It could have been that moment. It could
But
have
you
been.
didn't know. You didn't know.
No. But if I hadn't been so preoccupied with everything in my life, I would have asked the questions. I would have sat him down and said it, because if it hadn't been Charlie, I would have sat him
Would have
down
questioned
and
it. Yeah.
said, why are we using lidocaine? Why did you use lidocaine? I would have been very, very clear that this was a med error and I would have written him up. I would
Yeah.
have. If it had been anyone else. And that could have been the moment that my intuition could have kicked in and it didn't.
Yeah. I get that, but hindsight, right? And I think you did the best with an unbelievable situation. If he were to reach out to you today, would you go visit him or accept that phone call?
Yeah,
Would
I
you?
would. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would. Um, I do believe he's two people. I
Yeah.
don't know which one is real. I don't know if he was pretending to be the person that I wanted him to be, and that's not the real person, and the real person is the murderer. And the real
Yeah.
person, because I met the murderer twice. I met him twice. And he was angry, smug.
That's interesting. Like arrogant?
Oh yeah, very,
Interesting.
very arrogant.
What was the second time? I assume the first one was the lidocaine. No?
No,
Oh.
the first one was when I wore a wire, and so when I wore the wire to get a confession, I told him, I mean, we were in the restaurant for a couple of hours, and I said to him, I'm here because I'm your friend and I know you did this. I know you did this. And let's go in together. Let's go. We'll talk to the police together. I will not leave your side. And he switched. The person who I thought was my friend was no longer there. His eyes
Dr. Jekyll,
changed.
Mr. Hyde.
His posture changed. He became a different person. And he said, I want to go down fighting.
Okay.
That was enough of a confession,
Yeah.
but the wire malfunctioned.
Yeah.
So no one heard it.
Do you
And
think he knew or suspected?
do you think that he suspected I was wearing a wire?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No. Absolutely not.
So
Absolutely
why do you
not.
think he switched in that moment?
Because he thought that I was still believing in him, that he was my hero.
Okay. That makes sense. So what was the second time? I'm really interested because if you have never witnessed someone switch like you have, you cannot appreciate
Yeah.
how I have witnessed it once.
Yeah.
And it was with my old ACNO, assistant chief nursing officer. That woman, insane. And I witnessed her do it to me right in front of me, and I will never forget it. It's beyond description. So, what was the second time?
So the second time was the detectives asked me to go back in because they had arrested him, and because the wire had malfunctioned, they were going to have to let him go. So they asked me to go back in to see if I could get an actual confession from him. And after spending, I don't know how long I was spending with him, but he did. I eventually said, I am probably going to be implicated. I'm going to be dragged through the mud. I'm going to have to go through a trial. Your daughters will have to go through a trial. And you get to be the hero today. And boom, he sat up. The arrogance came back. His chin went out, and he was just proud. He was
To be the hero.
proud. He was proud to tell me that he was a serial killer. He was proud of it.
Did he say it outright?
He said, I said, what did you do to Father Gall? Because that's who we were investigating at the time.
One of the
And
patients.
he said, I injected him with lidocaine.
Just confidently said it proudly.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was not a mercy killer.
Yeah, well, I think that's safe to say, but I think that's probably what a lot of people would assume would have been his motive, was that he was going to ease people's suffering. But there were patients that were improving that weren't expected to die.
But
that he did this to, right?
How do you ease someone's suffering with vecuronium?
Right. No, I mean, that's absolutely horrific and torturous.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the insulin, maybe, but I mean, it's just awful. Shouldn't laugh. Oh, Amy. Thank you for sharing your story with
Thanks
everyone.
for having me, Erica. This has been, I feel like we were just like FaceTiming with each other.
I know. I can't wait to finally meet you one day in real life. I know we've talked before.
We will do that for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Where can people find you?
So they can find me at amythegoodnurse.com. They can also find me on Instagram, Amy the Good Nurse. I'm on TikTok, but not much. I scroll on TikTok, but I don't really post much on TikTok. But I'm also on TikTok, Amy Loughren. So, yeah, I would love to hear from anyone. I love getting DMs. I answer everyone. I do still have one-on-one clients. And so if, if something is speaking to someone listening to this and they would like to work with me, they can take a look at the website and see if it speaks to them.
And we'll link it in the description of the podcast. And I know you also do some speaking, public speaking, and you've hosted retreats and all sorts of amazing things, right?
Yeah, we do. A lot of the retreats now that I am doing are not in the country, and they are like the next one is like in Vietnam, and they're, but it is with an Australian company. So yes, I am.
Nice.
I am speaking. Yeah, I do keynotes. Yep.
I'm so glad that you have been able to come out on top after going through something unimaginable. And I wish you only the best.
Thank you,
Thank you
Erica.
so much. Until next time on the next Nurses Uncorked.